contributing to the lower than projected expenditure by around 4.3 billion, 2 billion, and 1.9 billion respectively. While transfer and subsidies, interest and rent on land, and payment for financial assets spent higher than projected at the end of third quarter, in totality of around 7.3 billion. In terms of your COVID-related expenditure, this amounted to around 24.5 billion at the end of third quarter. Next slide, please. Okay, taking a deeper look into departments that mainly contributed to the higher than projected expenditure, these departments are corporate governance, which spent around 4.2 billion higher than projected, mainly under transfers and subsidies due to withholding of transfer payments of the local government equitable share in the second quarter, and these funds were only paid in the third quarter of the financial year. This delay was to ensure that municipalities comply with the requirements set out in the Division of Revenue Act. In terms of the Public Enterprises Department, due to funds disbursed to Eskom and South African Airways for payment of guaranteed debt and the implementation of the Business Rescue Plan, respectively, this has resulted in the department spending 2.8 billion higher than projected, mainly under the payment of financial assets. Under the Department of Social Development, this department spent 2 billion higher than projected at the end of the third quarter, mainly under transfers and subsidies due to higher number than beneficiaries eligible for the COVID-19 social relief on distress grant. Next slide, please. This focuses on National Treasury. National Treasury spent higher than projected, amounting to around 843.3 million. This was mainly under payment of financial assets for South Africa's sixth capital installment to the new development bank due to exchange rate fluctuations. Under the Department of Science and Innovations, the higher than projected spending is mainly under transfers and subsidies due to issues with the finalization of contract payments under the Strategic Science Platform, which delayed payments from the second quarter to the third quarter of the financial year. The department has since received approval to increase this transfer in November, which was too late to actually revise their projections in their in-year monitoring tool. Next slide, please. Okay, looking at departments that mainly contributed to the lower than projected expenditure at the end of the third quarter, we have the Department of Police that spent lower than projected by around 2.5 billion, followed by the Department of Transport and Defense at 2 billion and 1.6 billion respectively. Under the Department of Police, the lower than projected spending was under compensation of employees due to vacant posts that have not been filled and the non-implementation of the cost of living adjustments for the third year of the 2018 wage agreement. Under goods and services, savings relate to travel costs as a result of virtual platforms being utilized under the circumstances that we are in. Payment for capital assets also contributed to the low spending as there were delays in receiving invoices from the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure for office accommodation. The Department of Transport spent lower than projected, and this was mainly under transfers and subsidies due to withholding of scheduled capital transfer payments to the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, PRASA, pending approval of the second adjustments budget. Also, the withholding of transfer payments under the Public Transport Network grant as a result of non-compliance of 2 municipalities. Also, the revision of the grant payment schedule for Johannesburg and Cape Town municipalities, and the lower than expected demand on the taxi recapitalization program that contributed to the lower than projected spending under the Department of Transport. In terms of the Department of Defense, there were delays in the verification of invoices from the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, which also delayed payments. Also, due to COVID-19, procurement plans were also impacted as local and international businesses closed, and procurement plans had to change to accommodate COVID-19 interventions. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Department of Human Settlements and the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform, and Rural Development also spent lower than projected by approximately 1.1 billion and 1 billion respectively. Under the Human Settlements Department, the lower than projected expenditure is attributed to lower than anticipated conditional grant payments and public entity payments under transfers and subsidies. This is mainly due to amendments to the payment schedule, withholding of the Human Settlements Development Grant transfer for Northwest, Eastern Cape, and Free State due to non-compliance with the requirements set out in the Division of Revenue Act. The Institutional Investment Grant transfer payment in November was lower than anticipated and incorrectly classified, while the operational transfer schedule for December was not transferred as the entity did not adhere to the department's internal financial management process requirements. And transfers were not made on the National Housing Finance Corporations for the finance-linked individual subsidy program, as the entity did not adhere to the department's internal financial management process requirements. In terms of agriculture, land reform, and rural development, the lower than projected expenditure was attributed to compensation of employees due to vacant posts that have not been filled and delays in payment to beneficiaries of the presidential stimulus incentives. Under goods and services, there were delays in the implementation of land tenure reform projects, finalization of land claims due to COVID-19 travel restrictions. Under the department's transfer and subsidies, there were delays in processing of the Comprehensive Agriculture Program conditional grant to provinces as well. Next slide, please. Okay, in terms of the Department of Basic Education, we also see that this department spent lower than projected by approximately 743 million, mainly under payment of capital assets related to the school's infrastructure backlog grant. The low spending is due to the slowdown in construction activities due to the lockdown restrictions that were implemented. It has made verification of completed work more difficult, resulting in delays in the authorization of payments. In terms of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, we see compensation of employees and goods and services contributing to the 677 million lower than projected expenditure. This is mainly due to vacant posts as a result of natural attrition, delays in the receipt of invoices for contractual payments, and office accommodation from the State Information Technology Agency, which is SITA, and the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, respectively. Public Works and Infrastructure, here the lower than projected expenditure of 599 million is mainly attributed to the low spending on compensation of employees' budget due to delays in filling of vacant positions. The low spending on goods and services, which are across various items, are due to the deceleration of departmental activities as a result of nationwide lockdown restrictions, and low spending under transfers and subsidies were due to non-transfer of funds to the Independent Development Trust. However, this payment will be made before the financial year end, as the acting DG has since signed on the approval for this transfer. Next slide, please. Looking at the personnel spending and vacancy rates at the end of the third quarter, just a few departments that we would like to highlight. The Department of Police, lower than projected expenditure was mainly due to delays in enlistment of new student police officers and trainees, which was delayed due to the nationwide lockdown. It should also be noted that filling of vacant posts in the 2021-22 financial year will have to be done in line with the department's revised compensation of employee ceilings, which were impacted in year by reductions and the non-implementation of the 2018 wage agreement for the final year. Under the Department of Higher Education and Training, lower than projected expenditure is mainly because of claims from examiners and moderators that were not received as projected from the TVET colleges and the community and education training colleges. In terms of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, here the lower than projected expenditure under the compensation of employees is mainly due to vacant posts that were not filled as projected. Next slide, please. Thank you, Chairperson. I'll now hand over to Dr. Mambo Mudiza, which will take the committee through the quarterly expenditure report for public entities.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm just trying to switch on my video. Thank you. So, Chairperson, I think the first few slides in terms of the public entities are just to remind the committee on the different types of these entities and the classifications that we do and which ones we will be presenting to you. So basically, there's still challenges in terms of the reporting, and this slide just explains to the committee members why we're reporting on the second quarter rather than the third quarter. So basically, those would be background slides. So Chairperson and honorable members, the first entity that I'll be looking at is the compensation fund. So if you look at what was projected, they projected to receive receipts of 7 billion, but at the end of the second quarter year to date, their receipts were 10 billion, which was 3.2 billion higher. And this, Chairperson, was mainly because the entity decided that they're going to aggressively do a marketing campaign, which resulted in higher revenue. But if you look at their spending patterns, basically there's somewhere where there's lower than expected spending. We're looking at either compensation or goods and services. And this is mainly, Chairperson and honorable members, because of the lockdown, or yes, because of the national lockdown, and also the opening gradually of the economy has an impact on this. And Chairperson, I think what we have been seeing across these entities is that most of their spending is lower than we expected because of this, but there are others who were lucky enough to increase their revenue, but most of them, their revenue was affected, especially those ones who depend on external sources rather than those ones who get allocations from the state. So basically, just looking at the legal aid, mainly the numbers are as we expect them to be, but they had a little bit of higher payments in terms of goods and services, and this was mainly because they saw a gap and they decided to pay for office accommodation, so they did it much earlier, but this doesn't really affect the expectations that we have, so we're not too worried about the entity. Just looking at the National Empowerment Fund, this entity, honorable members, was one of those that received the COVID-19 release funds. And if you look at what they receive and what they have dispersed compared to the forecast is higher, and this is purely because of these relief funds. The next entity that we looked at, honorable members, was the National Health Laboratory Services, where the revenue that they expected in the second quarter was, or what they received actually was lower than what they forecasted. And this is mainly because there are still some provinces that have not paid for their invoices, which is affecting these entities' revenue collections. But also what you see is that despite the low revenue, they still had to spend on PPEs, especially for the lab technicians as well as the test kits. So if you look at the expenditure is about 1.6, 1.7 billion higher than expected. However, what this entity decided to do, honorable members, was to basically align their payment or their compensation structure with that of government. So they didn't really pay the increases, and they didn't also pay bonuses. So at least they have decided that they're gonna link their wages increases to that of the public sector, which is where you will see the savings in their compensation. And then the next entity, honorable members, that we're looking at would be the National Research Foundation. There isn't much deviations here. It's just that one thing, their revenue that they expected to receive was a bit lower than expected, but mainly that was because when we were doing the special budget, we had to do budget reductions, and the National Research Foundation, through the Department of Science and Technology, was one of those entities where their budget allocation was revised downwards to deal with COVID. In terms of the National Skills Fund, honorable members, basically their revenue was affected by the 4-month payment holiday, but not significantly, and they actually spent much less than what they expected to spend, and this was mainly due to the lockdown. In terms of the National Student Financial Aid, honorable members, the revenue was much higher than the estimates, but this is purely because the Department of Higher Education decided to transfer the money much earlier to help them with cash flow. But if you look at some of their expenditure, there's some minor underspending, and those would mainly be as a result of the lockdown. For example, in terms of vacant posts were not filled, there were delays there, and there were also delays in invoicing, especially looking at the active project, and there were some delays from universities. So that funding was basically delayed. So in terms of overall the numbers, we're not too worried about their cash position, because they have a surplus of about 11 billion, which is it's been mainly because of early transfer. So we're not too worried about the financial position of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Then looking at PRASA, which is the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, honorable members, the revenue seems marginally aligned with the estimate, so we didn't see or pick up any loss of revenue there. However, we are a bit worried in terms of their spending patterns, because if you look at where there is significant underspending, the underspending is at the payment for capital assets, which means that PRASA is still behind in their capital program. So if you look at the programs that they are behind with, is the rolling stock, they're behind, the signaling project, they're behind, and the refurbishment of the existing stock, they're also still behind. Basically, PRASA has, the Minister of Transport has appointed a new board. There was the World Bank technical support that was provided to PRASA, but there are other critical positions that are being filled, and one of those would be the CEO. So we're hoping that by dealing with the governance structure of PRASA, we will start seeing some improvement in their capital spending. But this is still a worry, honorable members, because they expected to spend about 4 billion at the end of the second quarter, and they only managed to spend around 790 million, which is significantly lower than what they said they were going to spend. I'm looking at the road accident fund, basically the numbers look fine for the revenue that they collected, and the spending is aligned to what it's projected. But as honorable members will remember, the liabilities that is caused by the road accident fund is significant, and the bill was rejected by Parliament, but I think the Department of Transport will be working in trying to bring back the bill to Parliament, because the reason why we're looking at this bill is to reduce this liability, and the faster we reduce the liability, the better, because currently if you look at the contingent liability of the road accident fund, it's actually higher than the contingent liability of ESCOM. So we need to deal with reducing this, and one way of doing that will be through the bill that the Department of Transport is working on. Just looking at the South African national parks, because of COVID and the fact that this entity is in tourism, and that was the sector that was severely affected, the department had to basically transfer funds just to keep the public entity afloat. So if you look at the numbers, you can see that there were some additions that they got mainly because of the transfer by the department. Just looking at SARS, honorable members, the receipts and payments are aligned to estimates. We didn't pick up anything that we thought we should report to, but just the fact that they are still on par and they don't have cash issues. Just looking at SANRAL, the basically higher revenue was due to transfers from the Department of Transport. I think the issues of SANRAL are known by everyone, but what the department has done was to allocate funding a bit earlier because of the cash or liquidity issues that they have to deal with. There's still a bit of lower spending in terms of capital assets, where they estimated that they were going to spend close to 2.7 billion, but they ended up spending 1.4, and this is mainly because of the lockdown and the gradually opening up of the economy. If you look at the SASA, basically, we don't see anything that we should report on. All of their spending patterns are aligned to what we expected. South African tourism also, there's alignment. The UIF, honorable members, their cash reserve or their total receipts were lower by 2.2 billion. And this is because one, they had to liquidate about 64 billion in bonds, money markets, and equity instruments. So the interest they could have earned from those instruments, they had to forfeit it. But also the 2 billion was also because there were significant job losses, so the contributions were much lower. And then if you look at their spending, they expected to spend about 25 odd billion for the second quarter, but they ended up spending about 55 billion. And this, of course, would be because they paid about 29 billion for COVID tears, but there were other slow spending in small items. But I think the biggest thing, honorable members, is that 29 billion as at the end of the second quarter was transferred or was spent for COVID tears, which means that we might see significant increases in the third quarter numbers that will be coming through. So thank you, honorable members and chairpersons. I'm just going to project the presentation for the ALM team so that they can take us through the state-owned companies. Thank you. Ravesh, you next.
Thank you, Mampo, and good morning to the Honorable Chair and Honorable Members.
Ravesh, can you see the screen?
Yes, thanks. It's in presentation mode. You can move to the first slide. Thank you, Mampo.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Mampo. What basically I'm going to take the members through, or the other members through, is just an update in terms of the the presentation that we provided back in September. So basically, we're just going to provide what are the major challenges, what are the risks, and obviously what needs to be done to assist these entities to remain financially viable. So I think so the first entity that we're going to discuss is around Denel. I think just to remind the members in terms of the support that's been provided, you will recall that there's been the
Rajesh.
Chair.
You are a little bit in order, so please try to raise your volume and yeah.
All right, I'm just checking. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
All right, I'm actually talking closer to the mic. Thanks for the chair. So I think just to remind the members in terms of the support that's been provided, it's the it's the 1.8 billion that's been provided in 1920 and the 576 million that's been allocated in 2021. And of the support that's been provided in 2021, there's around about 150 million that's left, which will basically keep the entity running until the end of March. I think the major issues with Denel is around the fact that they were out of cash at the end of March, and in terms of the support that would be required for the next 6 months to keep them afloat is around about 500 million rand, while they also look at trying to resolve some of the issues in terms of their future plans, in terms of the turnaround plan. So in terms of the issues with the turnaround plans is around the fact that they haven't at this moment really progressed in the sale of non-core assets and also the strategic equity partnerships. Chair, if the members can recall, back in 2018, when the support was provided to Denel, it was meant to be augmented by the sale of non-core assets and also the the introduction of partners to the business. But at this point there's been a huge delay. But there is work that's happening on the sides with regards to Denel. But I think the major issue here is that the future state of the entity still needs to be resolved. I think the Minister of DPE is at a point where he will then engage cabinet in terms of the turnaround plan to get support. So that is expected to be finalized by the around the end of Feb. In terms of just getting the buy-in from all role players in terms of the turnaround plan, which was approved back in 2018. Chair and members, I think the lockdown did have a huge impact in terms of the operations for the entity, where they've not managed to trade, and therefore they've not been able to realize the sales, and also they've not been in a position to repay some of their debt and also to pay staff salaries 100%. There's also been legal actions that have been taken by the creditors and the unions, as we've seen. We've also highlighted that the capital structure of the business still remains at risk. So there needs to be some sort of internal restructuring in the business to see how it can self-sustain itself in the light of no further financial support. We talked about the ratings downgrade, which has actually which has been a result of the business itself being in a poor state. And I think in terms of the revenue losses, I did highlight that they have missed the revenue target for 2021.
Travis, you're drowning again. You were doing very well, and then you start drowning.
All right, let me. I'm just checking if you can hear me now. All right. We've also mentioned the issue around the going concern for Denel, which also needs to be resolved. And at the moment they're not a going concern. So I think the major issue here is in terms of the Auditor General, in terms of trying to resolve the going concern issues, but also in terms of the findings with respect to the previous reports for the business in 17-18 and 18-19. And then, Chair, in terms of the net losses for Q3, they reported net losses of 1.2 billion, and they are expecting to report a net loss of 1.6 billion by year end. Chair, I think the key, concern obviously for us as the Treasury is around the ability of the entity to meet its obligations in terms of the debt that's due, in terms of, the guaranteed debt. There's about 2.7 billion that's meant to be paid between August and September. So obviously, if the turnaround plan does not is not implemented or executed, in terms of the support from the sale of non-core assets, then we could, again have a situation where, the creditors or, or like even the employees could actually place the entity into business rescue. I think we've mentioned this before in September when we raised the issue of the likelihood of the business being placed into business rescue or into liquidation as well. But that's just I think something that we need to that we need to actually just remind the committee of that, that the business is in a dire state, and obviously there's a lot of issues around the impact of not implementing the turnaround plan. Okay, thanks, Mampo. If we can move on to the next slide. Dr. Medisa, next slide, please.
I moved it on my side. You still cannot see.
Here. I've got it. Thanks. Excellent. Thanks, Dr. Medisa. All right. Now we move on to the South African Post Office Chair and the honourable members. I think we would just like to highlight the support that's been provided, the 2.947 billion in 2018, and also the 1.5 billion that's been provided for the Universal Services Obligation for the development mandate. There's no government guarantees in place, and no further funding has been provided to the post office. Chair, here, the major issues is, as we've highlighted before, is the restructuring of the post office that is very, very crucial. I think it's it's something that we've been talking about for for a number of months and years. I think we've reached a point now where if the entity is not restructured or repurposed very soon, it will collapse. I think we need to decide, in terms of what role does the post office need to play in the postal services, industry, because we believe that it cannot continue in its current form. I think when we did, present last time, we mentioned that the management structures are in, disarray. There are a lot of acting, positions at the moment, COO, CFO, and CEO. There's been no accountability in this, in respect of the poor implementation of its, of its strategy. And we've also, as a National Treasury, have advised the department to undertake a market study to determine whether and to what extent, is government, to be involved in the postal sector. We also understand that the minister as well is in the process of restructuring, the entity, which we've learned, and obviously there is a process of appointing a chief restructuring officer. The Treasury has also assisted in providing comments to the process of appointing the chief restructuring officer, so there is some movement there. Chair, we've also mentioned last time in terms of the staff complement, where it is overstaffed, and if one looks at what the staff costs make up, it's, in terms of total expenditure, it's about 61%. The Q3 results basically show that there's a loss of 1.987 billion. And that they've also recorded expenditure of 4.7 billion. But Chair and and honourable members, I think what's important to highlight here is that the revenue makes up around about 2.3 billion. So you can already see that the expenditure is more than double the revenue. And we see that the postal revenues, continue to, to decline. I think what's interesting in terms of the revenue composition, we've seen that for the first time that the financial services has actually overtaken, or actually comprises more of the postal services. So when we talk about the financial services, it's the motor vehicle licensing services. It's the provision of the SASSA grant and the and the COVID grant, which has actually helped to boost the revenue, but still the revenue is quite low, and obviously they would need to look at how it intends to arrest the decline in the revenue. We also have engaged with the post office, and we are of the understanding that the AG will not sign off on the on the financial statements as a going concern. And shared just the last point, as at the end of December 2020, the post office had outstanding creditors of 2.54 billion, and obviously they would need to settle that. But I think a large part of it also relates to to unpaid salaries and medical aid. I think we've mentioned this before when we were here back in September. I think the major point that we would also want to just highlight is, while the restructuring of the post office is actually being undertaken, I think there is there's a lot more that can be done in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of ensuring that it also invests in infrastructure in in the digital space as well, because a lot of customers are moving from the letters to the parcel business. So obviously there's a lot of things that can be done from the post office side in terms of repurposing its actual business in line with the market developments. Chair, that's all on the post office. If we can move on to the next one, which is the SABC. Thank you, Dr. Modise. Thank you. So with regards to the SABC, as we've said before, they've been provided with 3.2 billion recap in 2019-20. There's no government guarantees in place. And as at the end of December, they have a balance of 1.18 billion that's remaining to be utilized by the business. And this is largely for market content and for capital expenditure. I think the major challenges here, as we've seen, is the board faces tremendous pressure in the in the implementation of the Section 189 processes, and obviously that's still work in progress to try and manage its its staff costs. And the reduction of of the staff cost was actually identified as one of the main causes of its unprofitability, and it was one of the conditions for the support that's been provided. The number of policy matters that require review within the broadcasting sector, and obviously this includes how to define the public service broadcasting within a converged and digital environment. The SABC's mandate is also in need of review. Its mandate is currently very wide, as a result, costly to implement. And there's also a need to review the onerous regulations to which the entity is subjected to. I think chief among them is the the audio visual content, and also the SABC bill, which the Treasury has has actually provided comments to, and now is in the process of actually going through the public consultations. But it also looks at how do we define, or how do we differentiate between the, between the public service mandate and, the commercial mandate, and also to understand how that will be funded, because I think that's a key issue in, in terms of the mandate, in terms of the strategy going forward for the SABC. Chair and honorable members, as at the end of December 2020, the SABC recorded a net loss of 504 million, and they project a full year loss of 909 million. And as we've mentioned, that including the cash on hand from the recap, which is the 1.18 billion, the SABC has around about 1.78 billion euro cash on hand. And we are, when we have engaged with the SABC, they will, remain a going concern. But I think the key, focus area in terms of the how the SABC should remain, sustainable, is to ensure that it implements its revenue growth and profitability indicators, which are being monitored with the Treasury and the Department of Communications on a monthly basis. So thank you, Dr. Modisa. We can move on then to the next one, which is Eskom. Okay, thank you. Just in terms of the support being provided to Eskom, it's the 49 billion in 1920. There's the 56 billion in this financial year, 2021, of which 49 billion has already been transferred or dispersed to Eskom. There's a further billion that will be dispersed in the next, in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So that's the 56 billion for financial 21, and key the intent of the 56 billion is obviously to assist the entity with with its funding plan to pay debt and interest payments. Then there's a further 31.7 billion that's been earmarked, or that's been penned in terms of the October 2020 MTBBS for Eskom in financial year 21-22. In terms of the impact of COVID, they've had lower demand due to the lockdown, which has negatively impacted revenue. At the same time, so when we talk to what the impact has been, in terms of revenue, we've seen that they've actually had negative, or they've had a 9 billion rand negative impact in terms of revenue. In terms of the municipal debt, we've seen the increase in municipal debt due to COVID-19 as well, where it's increased to around about 35 billion as at the end of December. There's been no load shedding due to lower demand during this period. That's the last Q3. However, with the recent opening of the economy, load shedding has emerged due to system constraints, and Eskom has now updated its financial position to incorporate the impact of COVID and the sovereign downgrade. They've also considered further internal cost savings. So year to date, in terms of the cost savings, they've saved around about 8 billion, and they project to save around about 12 billion for the remaining of the financial year. So basically 8 they've achieved, and they target to increase that to around about 12 billion by the end of this financial year, which ends in March. In terms of further support, it's been made very clear to Eskom that no further support has been provided than what has been previously announced in terms of the support package. So there's no further support that will be provided by by government in terms of further equity support other than what's been outlined in the October 2020 MTBBS. The major challenges, as we discussed, is the liquidity challenges in terms of declining revenues, in terms of the onerous debt levels, the high cost structure, the increasing arrear debt due to non-payment, as I've highlighted above in terms of municipal debt. There's also the issue of regulatory uncertainty due to non-cost reflective tariffs. I think we've seen what's been happening with the entity in terms of it not being able to get the cost-effective tariffs, and they have now engaged with NERSA through the courts, which is not something that we want to see. We talked about, or we've, we do mention, the outdated, operating, model, which is not fit for purpose. So there is the unbundling process that's been progressing fairly well. We've got 3 work streams that basically has been, finalized. Terms of reference have been, have been also finalized. There's the legal and compliance work stream. There's a finance work stream, and there's a policy work stream. We are, at the moment now, the next step is for the steering committee to give the go-ahead. But while we wait for that, in terms of the steerco for the work streams, we are also then waiting for a due diligence from Eskom in terms of the optimal, debt structure, which will also fit into the work streams going forward. I think in terms of the year-to-date performance, I did mention that that the revenues have actually, been negatively impacted. In terms of, the losses, they have managed to report a lower loss. In fact, it's been a 5 billion rand loss, which is better than the budgeted 15 billion. And they've had lower sales of 9 billion due to the low volumes. But at the same time, they've also had lower, expenditure due to the fact that they were not able to do maintenance during lockdown, and obviously due to the low burn requirement from coal. So obviously that has also helped them, and also they've saved in terms of the finance costs, and that's why they've actually reflected a 5 billion rand loss, which is actually much better, better than the 15 billion loss that they've actually budgeted for. Okay, thank you, Mampo. We can then move on to the next slide, which is the last one from me before I hand over to Anati, which is on Airports Company South Africa. Chair and honorable members, here basically we just want to just re-emphasize the sound financial performance of of the entity prior to COVID-19. We just want to highlight the fact that they've increased shareholder value by 9.5 billion, and that there's been cumulative total dividends paid to the shareholder of 1.5 billion. But obviously with the onset of COVID, the revenue for the 9-month period end of December declined by 70.9% as compared to the 9 months period ended 31st December 2019. The losses, as at the end of December, was 1.9 billion compared to the 424 million generated in the 9-month period, at the end of December 20. So you can see, what the impact of COVID has had on this, this entity itself. And we've seen the passenger numbers for the first half of the year, 1.5 million against the previous year of 20.3 million, which is a 93% decline. So what we have now established is that the entity forecast cumulative net losses of approximately 5 billion over the 2020 MTF, which is from 2020-21 until 2023, and a further 5.2 billion by 2025-2026. The debt levels have improved marginally, but they are likely to deteriorate as at the end of December, the group debt was 6.7 billion with a very healthy gearing at 18%. But management has indicated that debt levels are likely to reach 11 billion within the next 4 years, resulting in a 53% gearing level. To alleviate the liquidity challenges, they have secured 810 million term funding from DVSA. They've also, in the final stages of disposing of the 10% shareholding in Mumbai International Airport, which should provide, support of 1.3 billion by the, around about April. They've also reduced capex. They've also reduced, operational expenditure. They've also managed to, offer VSPs to staff. So we should see some 300 million rand in savings over the next year or so. But they've also managed to to reduce operational expenditure on top of that by 1.2 billion. And then this to provide or to support the entity for this financial year, we provided the budget has provided 2.3 billion rand support in terms of preference shares. So in terms of the entity for this financial year, it's looking in a very healthy financial position, and I think they've managed to self-sustain in terms of disposing of assets, reducing capital expenditure and operational expenditure. Okay, thank you, Chair and honourable members, and I will now hand over to Nati to do the last slide, which is on Land Bank.
Thank you, Ramesh. Good morning, Chair, and to your honourable members. I think while we just wait for the slides to come on, I'll just briefly indicate that for the Land Bank, we'll be discussing the funding support. Just remind the honourable members about the funding support that has recently been given to the Land Bank. Remind you also of the challenges that they are currently facing, and then go into some detail about the liability solution, which is really the great or major response to their current problems, and then also discuss what is currently topical in terms of their audit outcome. Thanks, Mampo, for the slide. So if we just start with the funding support, we had the National Treasury as the shareholder recapitalize the bank with 3 billion. That's in the current fiscal year in the special adjustments budget. So that was really the immediate liquidity challenge that was in response to the immediate liquidity challenge that the Land Bank was facing at the time, but still bearing in mind that they were in the process of negotiating repaying terms with their lenders as they were in an event of default. So in terms of other funding support, the guaranteed amounts on existing debt was called and to the tune of 74 million. This was paid in June and August of 2020. And then in terms of the actual recap amount that was allocated during the special adjustment budget, that transfer went out to them in September of 2020. But the amount of the guarantees that were called was netted off of the 3 billion in terms of the transfers that were made. And then in the MTBPS speech, the Minister of Finance did make an indication that the Land Bank requires or has requested a further 7 billion rand over the MTF period. So that's still to be confirmed as we eagerly await the budget speech in the coming weeks. And then the Land Bank also has about 4 billion rands worth of unutilized government guarantees. At this point, we don't think they will be able to utilize them just because they are currently in default, and there wouldn't be any lender necessarily willing to extend that funding to them. And then if we just remind ourselves about their current challenges, they were primarily as a result of liquidity issues, and they started from, sorry, members, I just realized I hadn't put on my video, so I'll just quickly do that now. Apologies. So the liquidity challenges were primarily exacerbated by the credit rating downgrade, and then events quickly led into the default of the Land Bank. And then if we just take a look at how much is actually in default, although the facility that actually triggered the default was much smaller, we did have legal clauses that had triggers that led into all of their debts becoming currently due and payable. In terms of that quantum, it's 40 billion rands. And then the current in the current situation, since April of last year, then the Land Bank has been through these challenging and very protracted negotiation processes with its lenders, and that's primarily to agree new repayment terms. In the interim, there is one lender that has applied to the courts, and the Land Bank may be required to make a 400 million rand payment. The bank is Standard Chartered Bank, as per the court order granted to this bank, and that's for the purpose of making a repayment against the loan owed to them by the Land Bank. And then if we look at the liability solution, that Land Bank, that's essentially their repayment plan as they are renegotiating terms with their lenders. What we call the liability solution is what is on the table, what is under negotiation. Just to remind the members that the purpose of this liability solution is to cure the default and eventually repay the debt under new terms. So the initial proposed liability solution, I think we had presented it to this committee last year, required a guarantee of up to 60% of Land Bank's existing defaulted debt. It was about, in terms of the approximation, it was between 20 and 24 billion rand. And then that guarantee wasn't granted because if you look at the underlying terms and conditions attached to it, it would have led to the Land Bank defaulting and then that guarantee being called. So on the table currently, after the guarantee was not approved, we had the Land Bank then go back to their lenders with a new liability solution proposed. And this is essentially to pay, the proposal is essentially to pay back outstanding debt over a 5-year period through an amortizing note. The note will not be government guaranteed, but it does, however, assume the 7 billion rand recapitalization that was mentioned in the MTBPS as being required by the Land Bank. So then in terms of how this will assist, together with the 7 billion, then the Land Bank envisages that using the proceeds from the repayment of client loans, as well as selling down their loan book assets, together with the recapitalization, all of those amounts will then assist them to repay the 40 billion rands of debt that is currently outstanding. And then in December, and more recently, when the Land Bank issued their annual financial statements, we heard about the audit report where the Auditor General expressed that an opinion that the audited financial statements of the bank for the financial year 2019-20, there were very significant findings in that. One major theme being the internal controls and adherence to governance processes being highlighted. And then I've listed the elements of the findings, the major themes or elements in the AG's report. The Land Bank is currently not a going concern, and that's primarily because of point 2 there, the inability of the Land Bank to meet its debt repayment obligations. There was also insufficient evidence that Manage had properly accounted for expected credit losses due to inadequate internal controls. That's also a significant finding. And then there was also the failure to, in terms of compliance to legislation, because in terms of the PFMA, they are required to prepare, financial statements with the proper evidence and to maintain a system of proper internal controls. And so then in response to this, what as the shareholder is happening is that a remedial plan has been submitted for monitoring, and it does cover all of these significant areas of findings. And with the current financial year almost coming to an end, there is very close collaboration with the management to ensure that we don't have a repeat disclaimer audit, especially in terms of the elements that are well within their control. So that's the end of the slide, Chairperson and honorable members, and also the end of the presentation on the state-owned enterprises. Thank you.
Chairperson, thank you so much. This is us from the Treasury. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mampo and the team. You were quite disciplined with the time, exactly 10 past 10. Honorable members, we have received quite a mouthful on the third quarter performance and on the entities and the SOEs. Then can I have the indications of honorable members who would like to speak? I see Honorable Sarupen. Let me see. I'm writing. Honorable Mare.
Matafa.
Honorable Matafa. Honorable members, are you there?
Kaiso.
Honorable Kaiso.
Kangweni.
Honorable Kangweni.
Honorable Dihale.
Honorable Dihale. All the members still on. Honorable Peters, are you on? I know you had a problem with your connectivity.
Yes, I'm on, Chairperson.
Okay. Do I have your hand up? Honorable,
Yeah, you can.
Honorable Peters. Okay. Honorable members, am I leaving out anybody who would like to have something to say? Okay. We know how to do it. It's our first meeting, so I want to be generous. Honorable members, let's maximum 5 minutes. You don't have to take all your 5 minutes, but let's say 5 minutes. I'm having my stopwatch.
So,
and
sorry for the advance. You didn't check on the Honorable Mlenzana. I don't know whether he's in or...
Yeah, I was asking Honorable Mlenzana, are you? Okay,
no, I'm fine, sir. I'm fine, sir.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll I said 5 minutes, honorable members, but you don't have to take all your 5 minutes. My stopwatch it's on. I will start with Honorable Sarupen. Morning, Honorable Sarupen. I didn't see you. Please go for it.
Morning, Chair. And sorry, I'm in Gauteng where my bandwidth is even worse than Acacia Park, so I'll have to leave my camera off. Chair, let me start with the Land Bank and its completely dire audit situation, which really is troubling considering that the committee here and Parliament agreed to a 3 billion recapitalization last year in the absence of this particular piece of information, which makes me feel like the wool was pulled over our eyes at the financial management of the Land Bank itself. So I'd like to know what conditions Treasury applied to the 3 billion recapitalization of the Land Bank, and if those have been met, and what steps are being taken to ensure that the Land Bank actually gets its act together. Because they've got, if I'm reading this correctly, they have got government guarantees, 4 billion rand still available to them in government guarantees. This is how you trigger a debt crisis, is when an entity in such poor financial state is able to maximize its government guarantees and then not meet any of its debt obligations. So I'd really like to understand what steps are being taken by the Treasury side, particularly considering that we've recapitalized this in the last year, that they're actually going to get back together. Then with regards to Airports Company South Africa, I see the state has committed to purchasing shares worth 2.3 billion. considering that the state is pressed for cash rather badly, has there been any consideration given to looking at shares being sold to other shareholders, other minority shareholders, some sort of equity deal rather than relying on endless government support? I mean, the state will still be the majority shareholder at 74.6%, if for ideological purposes or whatever the state is determined to hang on to majority ownership of AXA. But I think that we need to start looking for alternative funding mechanisms forthwith if we're going to deal with that situation. Then with regards to Eskom, we do get the regular reports from Treasury, Chair, now, which I'm quite grateful for, which tells us these are conditions, this is the status of the conditions, and we're seeing that with Eskom and SAA. I'd like to know if the conditions onto these bailouts are being reapplied every single year when cash is transferred, because I see last year was the current financial year was 49 billion rand in financial year 2020. Next year, financial year 2021, that'll be year coming up, 56 billion, and then 31.7 billion. Probably the single biggest SOE bailouts annually every single year that's coming through. And of course, we're asking people to pay for electricity directly and again through their taxes. I'd like to know if those requirements are imposed every year and if they're tweaked every year so that the states can properly assess, shows us that it does properly assess Eskom, its operational challenges, what's going on there, and its bailout conditions are being changed to meet changing circumstances. I also would like to know that as Eskom, if it does get its act together, is there a plan to reduce the amount of money being allocated to bailouts to Eskom? I mean, we need to be spending this on healthcare and on teachers and nurses and doctors and police officers. And Eskom really is a big drain on where we should be spending resources. So I'd like to know that if they've got a plan to reduce this over time, because otherwise it's going to continue to be a 30 to 50 billion rand expense annually. Then with regards to the SABC, I'd like to know if Treasury is keeping a watching brief or watching eye on the restructuring process at the SABC. If so, are they happy with the restructuring process at the moment? If they're unhappy, what have they advised the SABC? Is the SABC taking any advice from Treasury? Is the SABC looking at its revenue streams? Has it been improving its revenue streams? And if they feel that the SABC within the medium term, the next 3 years, is going to be able to be self-sustainable. Chair, I think I don't want to use up even more time. I think I've probably used up my time there, so I'll leave the rest of the questions for the rest of the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Sarupen. Honorable Mare, it's your turn.
Thank you, Chairperson. You're very generous with the 5 minutes. I normally do my question within 1 minute. You will learn by time. And I didn't correlate with my fellow DA member of parliament. My first aspect is around the land bank. And it's a straight down the line one question. Is the land bank technically bankrupt? Because if you look at everything that's been said, and they don't receive the recapitalization, they won't make it. So can we have a straight answer from Treasury about the land bank? Then the Eskom is the largest state-owned company that South Africa have, and it is a draining factor. And year on year, there is support from the Treasury for bailouts or to help, to assist. And as you know, we've got still problems with load shedding, and the two biggest, Kusile and Modise, that's been built, it doesn't give the results as far as power is concerned to South Africa. There's a serious problem. And can we have a highlight on what steps is going to be taken with Eskom to reduce the liability that the state have with it? Thank you, sir.
Chairperson, are you still part of the meeting?
I think the chairperson is disconnected. I don't see him. Okay, he's rejoining now.
Okay.
Matafa, are you on?
I am, Chair. Can I proceed?
Yeah, please proceed. I got cut temporarily. If that happens, again, Honorable Kaiso, can you please help me with sharing? Honorable Matafa, please go.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me start first by thanking Dr. Modise and the team for a very much detailed presentation. I just need to get clarity on about 4 questions. The first one is on the total vacancy rate, which the amount that is underspent as a result of that, it's quantified to be around 2 billion. I'm interested to know, given the COVID challenges and the new way of working, is there a way that this 2 billion will ever be spent? And is there a report or probably a plan from those departments that are affected in terms of how they are going to fill this vacancy rate, considering the challenge that COVID places in terms of person-to-person interaction? The second one, Chair, is on the issue of the funds withheld from provinces. I note that Northwest and Free State have their public transport initiative funds withheld. But I know that there is also money that is withheld on the human settlement. And if I'm not mistaken, the Free State and Northwest are also reflecting there. Is it a correct conclusion that these particular provinces have challenges? And I'm aware that Cabinet has put a team to intervene in the Northwest. I'm interested to know if there are extraordinary measures to consider the same in the Free State in order to assist the province and municipalities they be able to spend their grants. And another thorny issue, Chair, is on the issue of PRASA, the 3.1 billion lower spending on capital projects. Dr. Modise speaks of lower purchase of rolling stock. I have a problem because in areas where I normally move around, there are no cables, there are no tracks. So even if we acquire this rolling stock, where is it going to move? And I think also another observation of the 400 million reduction in revenue as a result of declining paying passengers is as a result of this infrastructure being damaged and removed from operation. So passengers obviously will move to other means of transport. And the knock-on effect of that particular movement is that it impacts on their earning because obviously the transport cost will increase. So I just needed to get a view from National Treasury to find out if whether PRASA is putting enough effort to ensure that this particular vandalism that has taken place to its infrastructure is addressed. And also maybe to find out how they classify this infrastructure, particularly tracks and cable. Is it maintenance or is it capital? Because if it's capital, I think the spending can be improved if attention is placed on those particular challenges. Chair, on ESCOM, the previous 2 members spoke about ESCOM. My direct question is the allocation for the guaranteed debt a once-off, or should we anticipate that they will again turn to the national fiscus to be able to assist with this particular guaranteed debts? The last one, Chair, is on SAPO. The situation as presented looks very dire. Now, I want to check on the relationship between SAPO and Postbank. The information that I have is that SAPO is fully owned, Postbank is fully owned by SAPO. And Postbank is in a process of applying for a banking license. Now, with the situation that SAPO finds itself, what are the prospects that even if Postbank do acquire a banking license, will make a successful bank going forward? So I just wanted to check if whether is National Treasury having a view that SAPO is exploiting its full value proposition, or are there extraordinary measures that are required? And I'm asking this, Chair, because under COVID-19 circumstances, counter-to-counter parcel movement has become a money spinner. You have other independent courier companies who use counter-to-counter that are making loads of profit, but SAPO is registering a reduction with its vast footprint that it has across the country. I'm not sure where are we having it wrong that maybe we can increase on its revenue. For now, Chair, I will pause there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to engage.
Thank you, Honorable Matafa. Honorable Kaiso.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and members, and compliments of the new year. I think, Chair, it's very important to indicate that much as we talked about I think we forgot to indicate at the beginning as well that, the issue of the coronavirus pandemic also affected some of us, and we wish to, send condolences to those families of the committees who were affected during that period until now, and also want to pass our condolences to the chairpersons who lost her mother, and Honorable Zembo also, who lost his father. So we want to send our condolences to both committee members. To start with, Chairperson. Chairperson, I have few questions here to put here after the informative presentation made by Dr. Mpo and her team of Treasury. The first question or clarity that I seek to understand is around the issue that is affecting taxi industry. I've heard there's a reference around the issue of low demand in terms of taxi recapitalization, because I understand that taxi industry it's one of the people that have always been complaining around the issue of the industry not being taken into consideration, etc. But I just want to understand what informed this low demand on recapitalization. And secondly, it's around the issue on NHLS that it has a lower spending. But my understanding is that NHLS plays a very important role during this period of COVID-19 pandemic. And one would not expect that it will have such a lower spending. So now there's a mention that some provinces do not supply or do not submit invoices. So we want a breakdown of these provinces so that we know exactly where are we referring to when we say people are not submitting invoices, which result into a problem. Let me quickly go to the area of the state-owned enterprises. I think this one we have been very clear around the issue of making sure that now the state-owned enterprises play a pivotal role, in as far as building a strong state. So we definitely would love that there is a life in all the state-owned enterprise. Now, if I go to DINEL, having observed after the report and presentation that DINEL, it faces a number of problems, is one of the entity which faces a number of serious problems. And I wonder, we will be talking about would you say that is it something that is going to take us to bail out now so that we know in advance, or because we do not want to see any of the state-owned enterprise, collapsing, but there must be every means that is being tried to save them, and ensuring that people take responsibility in what they are doing in those state-owned enterprises. Now, obviously, when additional funding is needed, there has to be something that drastically happens in as far as rescuing DNL itself as a state-owned entities. Now, the question is, what has been the delay of implementing the turnaround strategy, which was introduced in around 2018? Because I think it was very much important that that turnaround strategy is being implemented in as far as 2018. So I think the loss of 1.2 billion rand could have been saved. Let me lastly go to post office. Post office is one of the areas which is being highly contested, as well as by the unions. You remember when we were at ESCOM doing oversight, there has been a lot of contestation around some issues which have been raised around SAPO, South African Postal Offices. So the question that I'm raising is around the issue of being overstaffed, because I know, for instance, unions, they are contesting that area which is being said to be overstaffing. So maybe it will be important that at some stage we need to get the understanding of overstaffing, actually what it means with regard to South African Post Office, maybe having to meet with them, giving us actually the breakdown of their staff profile, etc., so that we understand that. Because if I can tell you what is happening in Kwakwa, for instance, workers are subjected into very dangerous working conditions there, and some have actually, no longer, interested to work in such circumstance, such that now the post office do regard them as people who are now redundant, because you can imagine, we no longer see a bicycle delivering a post to different areas because of the working conditions there. So even the IT system, it's really problematic. There are posts which have been lying there in Kwakwa Post Office since 2016. I'm sure if you can go there, you will find them being packed there without being delivered. Because of one, there are no proper tools of trade which workers can use to do their work, perform their work. As a result, it's very likely that the post office will also lose in one way or another and cause some delay, which are unnecessary. So I think there's more that needs to be done in order to support the post office, but thorough work and looking at actual causative problems at the post office needs to be unraveled, and so that a proper strategy is being arrived at, so that we get the post office at an operational, fully functional, and be able to deliver to its mandate. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kaiso. Honorable Tlangwini, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Dr. Mampo and a team for the presentations. I also like to just express to all of the members that have lost loved ones our sincere condolences. It is a terrible time, and by losing loved ones that is so close to you can set a person back emotionally and physically. So I like to express my sincere condolences to everyone that have lost a loved one during this time. Chair, mine, I think, is also just to go into the post office. For me, I feel there's somewhat a deliberate attempt, I don't know from where, that the post office shouldn't work, or because we have been having people in acting positions for the longest time in the post office, and this issue of the post office come from even last term. We just seem to not get things right at the post office. And for me, I just feel we're at a stage, there's this somewhere, there's just maybe perhaps a deliberate attempt that the post office mustn't work. And we shouldn't allow that as the committee, because the post office served and is legendary, one of the entities that serve our rural areas. People fetch their grants and all of that from the post office. So we really need to find a mechanism to help the committee responsible for the post office to let them make it work. We need to employ the people that needs to be employed and cut off where we don't need certain individuals in position. So really, we need to assist the post office in be more viable. And by our end of our term, that must be one of the things that we must say, we have got it right, at least in one entity, to let it work. Then on public enterprise, I just like to find out in terms of the business rescue practitioners in SAA. Can Treasury maybe perhaps enlighten us as to, from that I think 200 million that is mentioned there, and I stand to be corrected, how much was paid to the business practitioners and how much was paid to the normal staff of SAA? Because we can't allow a situation, Chair, whereby business practitioners are just walking away with big lump sums, millions, and you have normal staff that can't even pay the school fees of the kids, can't even pay for food on the table currently with some of the staff in SAA. And I think it's just a big greediness of this, if it's true that the SA rescue practitioners did in fact budget or pocketed that a lot of money. It's just pure greediness. And then on the issue of public works, Chair, I think we really need to, public works seemingly, I don't know what is happening there. They are just year on year now dropping in terms of their performances for invoices or quotations not to be submitted, for departments to not secure buildings and so forth. I think we also need to, even perhaps, even if we write a letter to the minister, because after this we'll obviously have to invite our decided departments to come and report to us. And I think the ones that we do have red flags on, we need to send them or the ministers some letters to kind of explain some of these expenditure patterns, even in basic education, in the infrastructure. We can't only have COVID as a scapegoat. Everything is now going to be COVID. So we need to, because we know as a committee, some of these departments had long underlining issues in terms of the spending patterns. So it can't now be miraculously that now everything now that is happening wrong in the departments, it's just alluded to COVID. And then Chair, on the other, I think the state really of a majority of our departments in terms of their spending patterns, it's a great deal of concern, and we really need to, as a committee, in this new year, pay closer attention and to helping departments to get it right. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Hlangwini. Honorable Tekhale, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to the honorable members and Happy New Year. Thank you very much to the National Treasury, Dr. Mampo, as she's leading the department, and all those who were taking part in presenting their presentation to us as the committee. I really want to say we were listening, and that was a good presentation. Honorable Kaiso, thank you very much for reminding us that our members of committee lost their parents, but due to COVID-19 restrictions, we failed to go and comfort them physically, but in spirit, we were with them. So there was nothing that we can do because of this pandemic. And that takes me to what I'm going to say with regard to this presentation, that some of the delays when it comes to the what you have observed on your summary of spending, when it comes to delays because of COVID-19 restrictions, at least this one, Chairperson, I really understand and I welcome. This is based on what they were saying. They had a delay in the implementation of land tenure reform projects due to this pandemic. This one I really welcome and understand. But what I don't understand is when it comes to the delay of a filling of vacant posts. People are really in need of work. And then when it comes to the department, maybe different departments so that they can assist them, there's always this delay. This one I don't welcome. I also don't welcome, well, the honorable members touched on public works and infrastructure development. Well, that one I really don't welcome. I think, Dr. Mambo, when you go and do your revision, because if you check on social development, truly speaking, every month when it comes to assisting those who are getting the social grant, they are always doing it perfectly. You'll never hear that our grannies went to post office in order to get their social grants and they came empty-handed. Maybe what must be done is that these ones who are not using what is allocated for them maybe should be taken to the Department of Social Development, and they should be told that they must take it to these poor and vulnerable people who are getting a little and they're failing to satisfy the needs in their families. So, Chairperson, the members has touched on the issue of ESCOM. I won't make a repetition when it comes to that one and Nel. On that note, I would like to say we are really thankful for the presentation, and please let's come up with a remedy that will, at the end of the day, make this department do what they're supposed to do with the funding that are allocated to them. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Tekhale. Honorable Peters, did you say you're coming in?
Yes, Chairperson.
Please.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And let me join the colleagues who have conveyed their condolences to all members who lost loved ones during the last few weeks. May God give you strength to shoulder on and know that you are always in our prayers. And like Honorable Tekhale said, despite the inability to be physically present to support you in the time of bereavement, you were in our prayers, even at the moment when you were laying your family members to rest. May the good Lord bless and keep you and protect you and your families during these times. And remember, it is said that God in his own time is the greatest healer. We will understand when you go through those different emotional times. I would also want to take this opportunity to send compliments to all members of the committee. May 2021 be a different year from 2020. May we get an opportunity to really deal with this pandemic and get back to our workstations so that we can even see each other and engage each other even better. I also want to thank Dr. Mampo and her team for the presentation. Although because of my own network challenges, the site, I could not follow through on many of the parts, but because I do have the presentation, I could read from the site. Chairperson, I only have 2 or 3 areas to ask questions on. The first one is with regard to the Road Accident Fund contingent liabilities issue. I just want to find out from National Treasury whether there is no other alternative way of dealing with the challenges of the Road Accident Fund other than the Road Accident Benefit Scheme bill, because we know there is so much resistance, especially from the private legal and medical practitioners to this bill. And unfortunately, because the strength of their lobby make it possible for them to lobby members of parliament, this bill keeps on getting delayed. And I would want to say that there should be, in between the time of dealing with this bill, an opportunity for National Treasury and the Department of Transport, together with the Road Accident Fund, to look for an alternative way of dealing with these particular challenges that are facing the Road Accident Fund. The other one that I wanted to ask a question on is the issues with regard to the capacity of SAPO to be the agent that truly can deliver the interventions of government in dealing with especially the poorest of the poor. Chairperson and officials from and members and officials from National Treasury, I'm sure you would have seen in the last few weeks with the SRD grant beneficiaries, the conditions under which the poorest of the poor are being subjected to queue even overnight at post offices and still be sent back because the money has not been deposited. The other thing is that the post office is communicating with beneficiaries by cell phone, as if each and every member of the South African poor community does have access to a cell phone. And also we know the cost of data to make sure that the people can actually have, if they have the cell phones, have the cell phones being available to receive these messages. I think that there's also a problem. I'm worried, Chairperson. There are many of our members of the community who contact us and say, since their application and even their appeals, they've never received anything, even when they could prove that for the last 10 or 15 years, they have not been employed. They have not been able to get the joy from benefiting from this 350 rand. Even the extensions means nothing to them because they've got these particular challenges. So I think it is important that National Treasury and SASSA, together with SAPO and DSD, can be able to deal with these particular challenges that our people are facing. Because, Chairperson, it will be an indictment even on us as members of parliament when at the end of this SRD, we find that there are many people who did not benefit, and yet there are still money that was not spent. I just want to know what then will happen in that particular situation. The other thing, Chairperson, you would remember that for many times in the previous year, even in 2019, there was an issue. I know that it was not on the presentation, but there's an issue of the EPWP and CWP program under DPW and COCTA.
I just want to find out, Chairperson, and this question is not directed specifically to National Treasury, but through them, the message can reach DPW and COGTA. Does it make sense to appoint service providers who are supervising or overseeing this program remotely? Because this is a program that is labor intensive, that is having a lot number of people, and these people are forever roaming around, visibly in the glare of everybody, because they do wear these orange overalls, not necessarily the prison ones, but they wear orange overalls, and they are sitting under trees. You ask them questions on what they are doing. They tell you some of them have got equipment that is not working since it was delivered. There are parts missing, and they don't know who to engage with, primarily because the people that they are supposed to be engaging with. In the Northern Cape, they tell me that the person is in Sebokeng, and that person is only known when they are supposed to get their allowances. And I think it is not fair on our communities that they have to be working remotely with people who are getting lots of monies in their name, and they get the stipends that they are getting. So I think that National Treasury should be able to look at how, together with EPWP and COGTA, they can try and make it possible that this particular EPW and CPWP program can benefit the beneficiaries, but also the communities where these people are working. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Peters. Honorable Sheikh, good morning.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you for that opportunity. Thank you very much for the presentation. My first question is to National Treasury themselves. You once again have been caught wanting in terms of your irregular expenditure and things, and you're supposed to be leading by example. Now, if you conduct yourself in such a manner, how do you expect those people below you to conduct themselves in a satisfactory manner? Could you also tell us what have you thus far done about the integrated financial management system? How many people are now in prison as a result of all the corruption that took place in that system? How far are you in terms of that system being completed? That's the second thing. The third thing is that I want to ask you is, now you've heard the president announce that there's going to be an extension of 3 months for the social relief grants and things. Has there been any engagement with National Treasury in this regard to make these funds available and things? Can you perhaps tell us exactly what the position is in terms of that? Now, a lot depends on our procurement processes in South Africa, and you are on the forefront of having an amendment. And even though we believe that the amendment is not good enough, it's not going to do stop the corruption that takes place. What do you intend doing about that to tighten the belt to make sure that we get more value for money, more money available to be able to spend on the ground? What is your current situation in making sure that those structures that are not performing with unlawful expenditure, irregular expenditure, fruitless expenditure, and poor management, which is resulting in the lack of delivery of services? What do you feel should Treasury's role now be in trying to get these people to account so that they could be more accountable and deliver better services with less, do more with less? The other thing is there's a political party funding that's coming now. What is the impact on that, and what is Treasury's views on that, and where are we going to get the money for that as well? So I'd like you to tell us more about that. You've told now, if you heard what the president said, 700,000 more job opportunities being created, plenty more. I'm not sure where the money is going to come from, because we thought that we were going to be reducing the 600 billion rand wage bill, but now it looks like we're going to be increasing it. The district model means you're going to be putting in mayors and things all over here, and their teams. It's going to increase the bills again. Now, I'm trying to look at a way forward that we could, change and become a more profitable organization and be able to provide constructive and meaningful progress. And I can't really see it with the current, maybe you in the driving seat, and you're going to be able to tell us today, how do you believe we can go forward in terms of it? Thank you, Chair. I'll stop.
Thank you, Honorable Sheikh. I don't think there's anybody I've left out. I would then come in and start by thanking Dr. Mampo and the team for the presentation. And obviously, I think National Treasury, as the custodian of the public purse, you'll always have to carry this cross of some of the wrong things that are happening within the departments, or things that are supposed to happen and that are not happening, and oversight responsibility as the custodian of the public purse. I'll just try to go as you were making your presentations. National Treasury, you spoke about the impact of exchange rate fluctuations as far as your responsibility to the BRICS Bank are concerned. Exchange rate fluctuations are going to be there forever. So I just wanted to know whether we do have any exchange rate risk management strategy as far as this is concerned. Otherwise, we'll always get it wrong. It is worrying that there is lower spending at police, transport, defense, human settlement, and agriculture. Other members have spoken about the implications of direct jobs which are supposed to come from that. Our inability to fill those jobs. For instance, if you were to take police, the implications of not doing that, I think I don't need to say what that means, and to recruit new police officers. If you look at the crime rates and the scourge of gender-based violence, which need more police within our communities. So one would like to know exactly what is happening, because I don't think just it can be normal that we always come and just report that. It's very important that when we appropriate money from this committee, it's used efficiently and it's used for the purpose which it was supposed to be used for. But I'm just saying, as far as service delivery is concerned, do we ever get the implications of this? But there's a bigger implication which we hardly talk about, of the inability of government to spend. You remember that in our GDP equation, there is a G there which is about government spending. So it's not just that if we don't spend, we affect service delivery directly. But again, we have also identified the budget as a way of stimulating the economy. And I'm not sure, Dr. Mampo, whether you do share this with your colleagues, that the impact is wider than just not being able to deliver on that specific responsibility, but on the wider economy, our ability to grow the economy, and you can go on and on, our ability to collect revenue, our ability to deal with the debt to GDP ratio, and so on and so forth. Because the implications of not spending money appropriated are just wide, and obviously it further impacts on the indirect employment creation. I see that we do withhold some money, for instance, the public transport network grant, in particular here for Mangaung and Rustenburg, and I think it's for good reasons. If people are not compliant, you are saying we're going to withhold money. But at the end of the day, do we understand the impact of that? That is the failure of civil servants to do their work somewhere. It impacts on what we are trying to do with our people, the recipients of those services. So I don't think it's a good thing that a solution is to withhold that money. I think we need to find other ways of dealing with this, so that people don't become double victims what we are supposed, or what the civil servants are supposed to be doing. I also wanted to check with you, Dr. Mampo. You were saying that when you were reporting on the entities, that you are reporting on Q2, while on government you are respecting on Q3, and therefore a lack of alignment. I'm not very sure whether I did get the reason why is that difficult. I'll tell you, because it makes us being about 6 months behind, as yourselves first and foremost, but us as committees of parliament. So any remedial actions that we may want to take, they may be about 6 months late, which is half the year. So I would like to know what is being done to try and correct that situation. And I think we must commend the compensation fund. I saw that they collected more than what they budgeted for. I think it's a good thing, but then we also need that money back into the economy. The perennial problem, and I think all members have spoken to this, inability of PRASA to spend money. 790 million rand spent out of the 4 billion rand that was initially budgeted for. Honorable Mataf and other honorable members spoke about this. This is the mode of transport which the poorest of the poor of this country rely on. People who go day in and day out to work. This is the mode of transport people who go to town to look for jobs use. And if we don't spend money on infrastructure, and we know infrastructure is just has been destroyed. There are no trains to talk of really. There are lines which have been closed, infrastructure demolished, no lines and so on. So, but still, the PRASA is not spending money. I know that in some of our discussions with the management of the committee, we said we do need PRASA and Department of Transport to come and talk to us about this. It has huge impact. It has got huge impacts when money is not spent to small businesses. Some are not being paid on time, and so on and so forth. I think, honorable members, it's an area that we do need to focus on as we go forward. The underspend at Sanral, I don't think is a good thing. As we travel in South African roads, there are roads which are especially with the trucks on the road, which are deteriorating every day. In some, you find big potholes in places where before you wouldn't find potholes. So we don't think it's a good thing for Sanral. And I think some interaction should be, because we allocate money for money to be spent. I think that's very important. And departments, when there is a reprioritization of funds from departments by National Treasury, everybody cries foul. No, don't take my money. But when people are given money, they just don't use it. I think it's putting us here in the committee in a very, very awkward position. When one talks about SOEs, I'm just going to be general and say, this committee, year in and year out, Parliament is told about turnaround plans, but they seem not to be implemented at any stage. What's the problem? What's the problem? Because at the end of the day, the failure to implement these turnaround plans end up impacting on this committee, because National Treasury will be coming to this committee and say there should be some recapitalization of it. And we have said before that we want to do it as we want to play our part as Parliament, but other parties should also play their part. When you talk about the land bank, for instance, we allocated 3 billion rand. But when you look at the things that they should be dealing with themselves as far as governance is concerned, basic things, you find that they are not being done internally, things which don't depend on anyone from outside. Coming to Eskom, as I finish, we spoke about 49 billion rand in financial year 56 billion rand in financial year 21, and budgeted 31.7 billion rand for financial year 2022. With all this capital injection, if, for instance, we were to tell a layperson and say, with all this money that has been injected to Eskom, what would you say that we have gained as people of South Africa from this money? What is the return that we can be able to go to the voters and say, this is the return of the investment that you have made at Eskom? And let's stop being esoteric about some plans, high flown plans. You go and say to the taxpayers' money, we have put so much of your money into Eskom. What is it that we can show that we have achieved with this money? And I don't know whether National Treasury do have a financial model which shows what types of benefits we are going to get from the separation of the three business units of Eskom. I think if there's one institution that I have sympathy for is from AXA, because you can see that before the pandemic they were doing very well, even declaring a dividend, and you can see the impact of coronavirus pandemic. And I think as the community will definitely be open-minded when it comes to AXA, because you can see, as Honorable Ntlangwini was saying, let the question of coronavirus not be a convenient excuse of people not doing their things. But here you can see, here's the impact, and you can see it's just a blip, and perhaps where we need to help, we will help. I think I would like to leave it at that and allow Dr. Mampo and the team to respond to these things. Honorable members, some of these institutions or SOCs are still going to appear before us. I see, for instance, in our proposed program, Eskom, we must meet with Eskom. And I also see there's the South African Airways. Please, Dr. Mampo and your team. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. We are here. I'm just going to ask Ravesh to go ahead, and then Unati, and then the public finance team will go after. Thanks, Ravesh. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, and also Dr. Modise. I think I will want to...
Ravesh, please speak closer to the mic.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's so much better.
All right, thanks. I'm going to hand over to Unati first, who will deal with the land bank questions, and then I'll take the other state-owned companies after that. Thank you. Hand over to Unati.
Thank you, Ravesh. Thank you, Chairperson and honorable members. So to answer the numerous questions on the land bank, there was one about what the conditions were for the 3 billion the recap when it was allocated. So in terms of that, the most immediate need that we were responding to was in terms of liquidity of the land bank. So the commensurate conditions was that those funds could only be used to repay interest and capital for the land bank. And maybe just to give a sense of what has happened since then, the announcement was made around June that the 3 billion would be coming. And then Land Bank has still been collecting from its own clients over time. So if you look at those two cash inflows, the equity itself, and then the Land Bank's clients repaying it, using those streams, they were able to then start repaying accrued interest. So the interest that hadn't been paid previously, they were able to catch up from August 2020. And then since that date, they have also been able to service interest on an ongoing basis. And then during this month, the current month of February 2021, they have also committed to repay down 10% of the capital. So the 40 billion rands that was talking about in one of the slides, they will repay about 4 billion of that to their lenders. So that's to contextualize the conditions of around the 3 billion and what has happened to it. And then then the other question was steps to get the land bank, what steps have been taken by the land bank to get its act together. So if we think of this, there are basically two elements that, the major response of management effort, the board's effort, and the shareholder support are going towards. Number one being the response or dealing with the debt or default position itself. And in terms of the liability solution that I was presenting on, that is the one major plan that attempts to renegotiate with the lenders so that the default of the land bank is cleared. So, because then what that does is that how it affects the audit outcome is that on a going concern basis, if curing the default position is done, then at least that element does not contribute, and it's a significant contributor. That element then does not contribute to the going concern outcome in terms of the audit. Then the other elements that management and the board, with the support of the shareholder, are also, is also highlighting the remedial plan put together in response to the audit outcomes, speaks to loans, advances, the impairment issues on the book itself. There's various claims and recoveries that have to be done against the non-performing loans, and then in terms of credit risk management in and of itself. So if I just point out some of the key themes in terms of what's contained in this remedial plan, there's the overall enhancement of internal controls. So these focus on the management of expected credit losses. So this speaks to the credit models inside of the bank, how they measure, calibrate, and make provisions for their expected losses, how they manage collateral, and then how they also then stage their loans. The other element that it has to be addressed is to ensure that the appropriate skills and institutional knowledge is maintained in the areas that are most affected by the audit outcomes, and the risk management function or expertise is most definitely one of those. There was the reports, probably last year of, when the various executives started exiting the land bank. Also at the senior management level, there were also a lot of exits, but gradually that has been addressed through the filling of vacancies, and it speaks to this this issue of addressing the appropriate skills and institutional knowledge. And then there were also key controls and deficiencies that the bank needs to focus on when it looks at its service level agreements that it has with its intermediary partners. So the intermediary partners are, one of the distribution channels that the banks use to originate loans for itself. And in terms of those service level agreements, there were some key control deficiencies identified. So that's another theme or element of this remedial plan that management is then focusing on. I think in terms of the audit outcomes, those are the major steps in terms of the land bank responding. And then the other question was in terms of the land bank, is it technically bankrupt? So I'll answer this in two parts. In terms of its solvency and then its liquidity as well. In terms of its solvency, the results for 31st of March 2020 indicated that the land bank is not technically insolvent. So it was still solvent at that point in time, with a net asset value of about 2.5 billion rand. And then in the interim results, 30th of September 2020, because of the transfer of the 3 billion recap, that position essentially improved to more than the net asset value being more than 5 billion rands. And then, but it's fair to still point out that the risks around the fact that the bank is still solvent. And the risks, a lot of things do point to the solvency, being at risk if there's continued losses, like we saw in the 2020 financials, and also if the non-performing loans, the trajectory of the response to the deterioration in the book itself, if that is not successful, then that still remains a risk. Then in terms of liquidity, if we're supposed to have a holistic view of bankruptcy, I'll discuss liquidity as well. And I think this really speaks to how the land bank has been able to service its debt. And the numbers I spoke to at the beginning of these answers, that is in terms of repaying interest and capital. So cash is a very risk responsive kind of indicator. So the liquidity and the risks around the entity remaining liquid is something that we also are focusing on, and appreciate that it's very much volatile. So I think those are the direct questions. I think the other issues were more comments from the members. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Over to you, Ravesh.
Okay, thank you, Nati. And so I'm going to basically respond to the other questions in relation to the other state-owned companies. So just to respond to Honorable Member Saropen in terms of AXA, in terms of whether we are looking at the sale of shares being sold to other shareholders. So at this point, there is no there's no initiative being looked at into selling shares at this point. We are fairly comfortable that for this financial year, that the initiatives put forward by the entity itself and the support provided by government will not mean that they would need to sell shares. However, should the need arise, then obviously the shareholder, which is the Department of Transport, will need to advise. But we would also like to point out that the private sector participation framework also looks into how we can also get the private sector to also assist and to provide the support that's required in state-owned companies. So that reform is in place, which can then be adopted by the state-owned companies. Then the next question from with regards to Eskom, in terms of the conditions, whether they do change from year to year and whether they are being met. Yes, the conditions for 2021 has been amended, and the chief amendment there was just around the procurement roadmap. So we've seen some significant changes and improvements in terms of the procurement side of things from the entity itself. When the time will permit, then at some point, we as a Treasury will want to, come and present, the compliance to the 2021 conditions. But safe to say that, all the transfers that have been done to date, that's the 49 billion, the conditions have been met. Obviously, we are very robust in the way that we disperse, the amount, so that we ensure that the conditions are met. So there's just the one condition, which is around the disposal of the Eskom, finance company, which we reported to in the last fiscal year, that is still, work in progress. So there is, some, significant developments there, which we can brief, the committee when we get the opportunity to expand or to just take, the committee into, the detail around the compliance to the conditions itself. The question around the, to reduce the, or when will we be in a position to reduce the allocations to Eskom? I mean, at the moment, what we're seeing from the entity itself, that it's still not in a position to generate sufficient cash to pay off, all its, its debt, and that's why the support package, which is the 230 billion that was, outlined in the October 29 MTBBS, of which, there have been funds dispersed, is to help with the entity to settle its own debt, because it's not in a position to settle its own debt from the cash it generates. So it is the intention of the, the unbundling process to assist and to make the, the entity itself more competitive, and also to look at where it also can save costs, and then to reduce the reliance on the fiscus in terms of further government support. But with that said, there is no other support than what's been announced that's going to be provided to Eskom in terms of the recapitalization. Then moving on to the question from Honorable Murray, his question is also similar to the previous question, was the steps to reduce the the liability or the debt with Eskom. So that's all part of the unbundling process, which is meant to make the entity more competitive and more efficient, and also to see how it will then reduce its reliance on the fiscus for further bailouts or government support. Then if we move on to the next question from the Honorable Matafa, was in relation to to a similar question around Eskom for further support. So there's no request or indication that there will be further support that will be provided to Eskom. And then there was a question around the post office, basically its relation between the post office and the post bank, and what progress has been made around the post bank itself. So basically the key issue here is just around the post office itself, because for the post office to be the bank controlling company for the post bank, obviously it needs to be in a financially sustainable position in order to be the holding company for the post bank. So and we've seen that that the post office as a group company is not financially sustainable. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to repurposing and restructuring the post office itself. But with the post bank, in terms of work being done there, I mean, there is a project that the Deputy Minister of Finance is is busily he's in charge of, which is basically trying to ensure that how do we look at the post bank in terms of the state banks. So there's still I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. So but the main issue with the with the post office being the bank controlling company is that it must be in a financially sustainable position. Then moving on to the next question from Honorable Koiso. It's with regards to Denel, and here it's with regards to what has been the delay in the implementation of the turnaround plan. So the turnaround plan, has been in effect since 2018, and obviously there will be further discussions between, Denel and its shareholder, I think by the end of Feb, where it intends on taking the turnaround plan for broader support to to cabinet, more especially in terms of the disposal of the non-core assets and the introduction of the strategic equity partnerships, because you would recall that as part of the support that's been provided by government, the 2.3 billion was meant to be augmented by the sale of the non-core assets and the introduction of the strategic equity partnerships, which was meant to bring in at least around about 3 billion. But I think there's a broader discussion that needs to happen with the Defence Force, with Arms Corps, and the other stakeholders in terms of how one goes about trying to ensure that Denel remains or returns to financial viability itself. Then the question on the post office in terms of the overstaffing and how do we get to the fact or the point that the post office is overstaffed. I think when one looks at the total expenditure for the post office at the end of Q3, which is Q3, it was 4.7 billion, and of that 2.8 billion is with relation to the wage bill, which constitutes 61%. Now, obviously, there's a process that's been undertaken by the Minister of Communications in terms of looking at restructuring, repurposing, the entity itself, and trying to see, how it can, contain its wage bill. I think, from the Treasury side, we are a bit concerned with the wage increases that's been recently announced, where the post office is not in a position to actually meet the wage increases. So I think that's something that we want to closely monitor and ensure that that the entity can and is in a position to meet its expenditure. But the main issue here is just around the revenue model itself and just the restructuring and repurposing of the post office. The next question from the Honorable Ntulagweni was around SAA, around the business rescue practitioners, around the 200 million rand that's been paid to the business rescue practitioners. We as a Treasury have not had sight of this amount being paid to the Treasury, to the BRPs. So obviously we will engage with the DPE around that. But in terms of the 10.5 billion that's been provided to SAA for the business rescue plan, 2.8 billion of that will go to will be dispersed or has been dispersed for for employee costs. So that's been done according to our understanding. Then from the Honorable Peters, there was a question around the capacity of the post office to deliver to the poorest of the poor. I think that's part of the the whole problem with the post office is that it's not nimble enough to see to the demands of its clients and its customers, and that's part of the repurposing and restructuring that we would want to see when the process does get underway with the Chief Restructuring Officer that we appointed to assist the post office in this regard. Then the other question on the social relief grants that I'll leave to Mampo and team to respond to. Then moving over to the questions from the Honourable Chair around the turnaround plans and what's been the problem. Chair, you are 100% right. I mean, we've been in these these various committees year in and year out, and what we've seen is that while the implementation plans or the turnaround plans have been developed, I think it's just the same old that we see year in year out is this around the implementation and also around change in management, or there is no because what we see is that when we have a CEO resigning or a CFO or a new board, then obviously that plan gets shelved or gets reworked or revived or repurposed again. And then what we see is that it will need further funds for bailouts. So I think what we would want to see is that we would want to see management and the boards be stable enough to ensure that the turnaround plans be implemented without any, without any interruption, and obviously no further, bailouts, from government, and then to the last question around, Eskom, in terms of what have we gained with the support that's been provided to Eskom over the past few years. So how I would like to answer the question is that if the support was not provided, obviously we'd have a situation where Eskom would not be in a position to to pay off its debt. It would have actually defaulted, and then government would have basically had to step in to settle the around about 300 billion rand worth of government guaranteed debt, which it has, but also that the entity would have probably gone into the business rescue mode or would have been liquidated. But if the support had not been provided, then obviously it had been a much worse position. But that said, the unbundling process is quite critical to ensure that we see a lean Eskom that's more efficient and that's able to not rely on the fiscus for further bailouts. And then, Chair, I think the question around the financial model, and the actual benefits of the separation of the three entities or the unbundling, basically, that's part of the financial work stream, and obviously that work is still, meant to be finalized and still meant to be executed. But obviously, we are waiting for the due diligence report from Eskom in terms of the optimal capital structure, which will also help us with the actual financial model. And then the one question that I missed out was around the SABC and in terms of the restructuring. So basically, we do meet with the SABC on a monthly basis, and obviously there are some concerns just around the implementation of some of the plans, around content and around capital, expenditure and so forth. So we are fairly comfortable, that the entity will not be coming back to the fiscus in this financial year for support, and hopefully in the next financial year. But a lot depends on them implementing, the turnaround plan, initiatives, which we do monitor on a monthly basis. And obviously, we are seeing some little, improvements there, but I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think key among them is just to look at and to cost the public service mandate, because it's quite broad, and we also need to understand what the SABC is actually meant to achieve in terms of the public service mandate, because that will also help us understand exactly where we can assist and where we can get maybe the public sector or maybe the private sector to come in and and assist as well. So I think that's key, in terms of the SABC, just ensuring that we still keep monitoring them on a monthly basis, but also ensuring that we are we're in a position to actually cost the developmental mandate or the the public service mandate. I think, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, I think those are the questions that I have responded to in terms of those asked. Thank you, Chair. And over to Mampo and team.
And thank you so much, Ravesh. Ulrika, please take over and deal with the PRASA and other infrastructure questions.
Thank you, Chair Mampo, and good morning to the honourable members. So in relation to the conditional grants and the withholding of conditional grants, I think it's important for us to understand that one of the important things that we have to do here is to distinguish between the withholding of allocations and the stopping of allocations, because they are two separate things. And in the withholding of the allocations, what the Division of Revenue Act requires is for the National Transferring Officer, when it does see a breach of the Division of Revenue Act, to notify the receiving officer of the intention to withhold, give the receiving officer an opportunity to provide reasons why funds should not be withheld before money is actually withheld. So when we see a withholding within the PTNG or within the HSDG, this withholding is usually for a period not longer than 30 days. There's a separate process if it is for longer than 30 days before we even get into a stopping of the allocation. And that's an important principle within the broader financial management system, as this money is conditional, and what we really want is for municipalities and provinces to adhere to the conditions that is then set out, so that we are able to then effectively measure value for money. So are there extraordinary measures that can be taken, Honourable Matafa? Well, yes and no. I mean, I don't know if we can't answer for the sectors, but I think that one of the things that, we do have measures that goes all the way up to instituting a Section 100 1A or Section 101B within a province, and similarly with a Section 139 within the municipalities to deal with some of these. But those are the last steps of what we do here. And these kind of measures usually help quite quickly in getting municipalities and provinces to remedy whatever breaches then sits within the legislation, for them to then continue getting their money as planned going forward. In relation to PRASA, so you're right, Honourable Matafa. Part of the problem in PRASA is understanding how you get the entire modernization program going again. So the rolling stock issues that we have within PRASA is a long-standing program that has been committed to and is ongoing, and that's a 10-year program. But what is relatively new is the vandalism of rail infrastructure, and to continue the rollout at the scale and pace that we had on the rolling stock program, when we don't have the necessary infrastructure, suggests that you need to rejig the capital program so that you are able to get the security, get the lines running again, doing the necessary upgrades that will get us there. And PRASA is struggling with that. I think PRASA is coming to terms with understanding the extent of the problem it has on the vandalism of the overhead cables and of the perway. And one of the things one of the things that PRASA is currently working actively on with the Department of Transport and other necessary agencies is starting to get some of these lines running again. The central line in Cape Town is probably the most notable one, where PRASA is working hard with the Provincial Department of Human Settlements and the municipality to clear the line, because people have settled on the rail reserve. To start getting that going, and hopefully once that gets going, we're able to see some movement within the CapEx program. The question around whether this is maintenance or capital, the extent of the vandalism suggests that because there's nothing there, you're basically rebuilding from scratch. So this isn't maintenance of infrastructure, this is capital, and where we should be seeing this is on the capital budget and not on the maintenance budget. In relation to Honourable Kagiso's question on the taxi industry and the low demand on the recap, it's just the way the program is designed. The program is designed in a way that taxi operators have to apply. And I suppose what is probably needed here is better marketing from the Department of Transport. So if no operators apply, the money doesn't get spent. If only 10 operators apply, then a large chunk of the money doesn't get spent. And that's really what's happening with the program. It is the Department of Transport is waiting for applications to come to them around the recapitalization, which is suggesting that, I mean, there's other problems within the taxi recap program, but the big thing around the low demand is that it's basically the national department is waiting for the industry to respond. In relation to Honorable Peters's question on the road accident fund and what are the alternatives, I suppose it comes down to policy and what are the policy alternatives that we can implement quite quickly. But those are long-term changes. As you know, Honorable Peters, the RABS bill comes off a RABS policy that has been implemented or approved by Cabinet in 2011. So it's a 10-year process, and that's on the back of a 10 years before that when we had the Satchel Commission. And what I think one of the things that we have to think about is what do we do in the short term? So we have these massive liabilities, and the thing with the massive liabilities is that it's growing quite fast and putting lots of pressure on the affordability of the system. So to deal with the affordability of the system is one thing, and that's a structural issue that you then have to deal with. The pressures that the road accident fund puts on the fuel levy does mean that we are making the fuel levy more and more unaffordable to road users. So then in the short term, it is what can we then do in the short term around all of this? And in the short term, the big thing around this is, can we make the claims administrative process a lot more smoother, a lot more unified, and that way you are able to then deal with a slowing down the growth in the liability when we have a claims administrative process that isn't open to rent seeking on both sides, whether it's on the RAF side or on the plaintiff side, and can root out whatever kind of corruption comes with all of that within the administration process, how claims are then settled. I mean, that's a big contestation within the RAF administrative processes, and that should help a lot. And the new management in the Road Accident Fund is confident that they will be able to manage a lot of the growth in the liability through streamlining the claims administration process. And then just in relation to the CWP, Honorable Peters, I think that we will definitely take this on to the Department of Cooperative Governance. As you know, the CWP has been facing a lot of governance issues and these big procurement problems that is resulting in, or has resulted in, this mismanagement or misalignment rather of where the beneficiaries work and the people who are tasked to ensure that all of that process is managed properly. That has been subject to a court case, and the Department of Cooperative Governance is trying to work quite hard in fixing all of that. I think that's where I stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ulrika Rendani.
Thanks, Mampo and honorable members. It's Rendani here. I'll be addressing one question in relation to the vacancy rate and the savings thereof. The question has been raised by, I think, Honorable Matafa and Honorable Dikhale and Honorable Chair. This is one question which was also raised in one of the previous meetings by Honorable Peters. Let me address it with special reference to labor-intensive department like police, defense, and correctional services. One thing for sure is that we'll hardly have a department which is at full employment, mainly because we have got people resigning and others joining the department or leaving the department through various ways. And then specifically in relation to the labor-intensive department like police and defense and correctional services. These are the departments who do recruitment through the enlistment. Like they will recruit large groups, they take them to colleges, train them, and then at the end, those who are successful, they get absorbed to the department. It's unlike a typical public service department, wherein if I resign today, National Treasury can advertise, and then after 3 months or 6 months or so, then they can appoint. With this department, for example, if we look at the police numbers within a year, if we look at the trend, you will see the numbers going down, because during that time, they've got people in colleges, and then come December, January, February, numbers going up, because those people, they've been through the colleges, and then they absorb them. When we were hit by COVID last year, in March, April, police were about to absorb the trainees. Unfortunately, they had to stop that program, including the Department of Correctional Services. They had people in their colleges, and because of the lockdown restrictions, they had to stop the training of those who were in colleges. So that's why you find, for example, police vacancy rate is 5.2%, and the number is 10,000, because they take them in large groups. So at any given point in time, especially given the total establishment, like for example, police, we're talking about 191,000 establishment, meaning that you're gonna have a lot of people living through maybe resignation, retirement, and disciplinary. So that's what explains the huge underspending in relation to COE, especially in those departments with huge establishment like police, defense, and correctional services. Yeah, I will end here. Thanks.
Thanks, Renani. Chairperson, I'm just going to go through the last set of questions. So the question on NHLS, so there were two portions, or there were two areas to this. So the first one was the overspending that I spoke about, where the entity overspent or spent more than expected. But this overspending was on PPEs for pathologists and lab technicians and the test kits. So they did spend more than what they said they were going to spend. The underspending I was referring to was the underspending where they saved some money because they didn't implement the salary increases, and they also didn't implement bonuses. So that was a small savings. But if you look at their overall expenditure for the quarter, they projected to spend 4.1 billion, but at the end of the quarter, the spending was 5.8 billion. So the underspending I was talking to, it was the underspending on compensation of employees. And the provinces that basically delay invoices to this entity, the biggest ones would be KZN, with invoices amounting to about 2 billion, Gauteng another 1 billion, and the Eastern Cape, that's about 500 million. So these three provinces are the main provinces that contribute towards these invoices or these delays in invoices. The questions on Treasury specific, IFMS and all of that, I think it's only fair that the DG of Treasury be invited to come and explain, because this team that is here today doesn't deal with IFMS, nor does it deal with procurement. We just deal with departments and public entities, and the asset and liability team deal with SOCs. So tomorrow, Chairperson and honorable members, I saw on the calendar that the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer will be presenting to the committee. So I think Mr. Stel would be the right person to deal with all the procurement related questions. And then the questions on the SRD grant, the presidential announcement, the funding thereof. Next week, Wednesday, the Minister of Finance will be tabling the budget review, and all that information will form part of the budget. In terms of whether we discuss with departments or there's meetings, there's always meetings with departments, but that announcement will be made by my minister because we're still finalizing the budget, the budget process. The issue on the political party funding, basically what the process has been for now is to get the bill enacted, and the idea from the bill is that the funds from different parts of the government sphere, whether it's provinces or national, will put together that funding into one fund, and hopefully that funding will be sufficient for the fund to run itself. So we're not envisaging that there will be significant increases in the budget for the political party funding. The act, basically what it tries to achieve is to consolidate all these different pots of funding and put it in one central fund, and then that fund should be big enough for it to run itself. But we did allocate a few millions a year or so ago in order to get the process going with the IEC. So that's where we are. Chairperson, in terms of the BRICS Bank and the exchange rate risks, so most of the times we do try to budget for exchange rate. There's very few departments that get affected by the exchange rate fluctuation. It would be the National Treasury, Department of International DECO, and health to some extent. So what we tend to do, Chairperson, we tend to use the macroeconomic forecast that is published by the Treasury. Those assumptions on the exchange rate, we use those. There are instances where the exchange rate depreciates faster, then we ask the department to use or to reprioritize. But in an event where there's a significant decline in the exchange rate, then they have to come back to us and ask for additional funding. So basically the strategy, Chairperson, is that one, we use the macro forecast to deal with this, but secondly, the departments are also advised to do their own risk assessment on when to pay these subscriptions, whether they pay at once, they pay when the exchange rate is favorable. So we usually look at that, and but if the exchange rate fluctuations are so severe, then they have to come to the fiscals for additional funding. However, if the exchange rate appreciates and the cost of what they have to pay for is lesser in rand value, then that money comes back into the fiscals. So we just balance both the appreciation and the depreciation of the exchange rate. Then, Chairperson, in terms of quarter 2 versus quarter 3 of the public entities, the most simplest explanation I can give you is that these entities submit 30 days after quarter end to their executive departments. So what tends to happen is that because they don't report the same as government, the verification process of the numbers that we get takes much longer. So when we get the numbers 30 days after the quarter end, we have to verify each and every number that we get, and that takes much longer. We did think about the fact that we can, what are the costs and what are the implications of submitting numbers that we have been verified. And what we realize is that it's possible, if you don't verify the numbers, it's possible that we can come to this committee and report on inaccurate numbers, which makes things even worse, because if you are you have to make decisions, or you have to have an oversight. If we provide to you wrong numbers, then it will be difficult for you to do an oversight. So basically, the reason why the verification process takes long, Chairperson and honorable members, is the way in which the public entities report. So we have what we call the basic accounting system, where the national departments report on it, but the public entities are not in BAS. So it means you cannot quickly just go into the system and verify the numbers. And then secondly, the budget structure of the departments is very different. So what we have programs, We have economic classifications. Most of these entities don't have that. They don't have detailed program information that we can use as national, compared to national. You also have the fact that the entities, they report on accrual accounting, while the national departments use modified cash systems. So even that makes it very complicated because the reporting systems are different. So when we come report to you, we want to make sure that the numbers that we report to you are accurate. And then you have other entities, honorable members, where it's very difficult to compare them because others are service delivery agencies, others are regulators, others are development finance institutions, then others are your social security fund. So just to pull them all together and do a comparison becomes difficult. Then another problem that we face is that these entities have different financial years. So some entities would have a financial year that is from the 1st of April to the 31st of March, but then you have other entities such as the water boards where their financial year is aligned to municipal financial year on the 1st of July to the 30th of June. So those differences and the fact that we have to make sure that we check the information takes much longer. That's why we have the delay. We are working with another division in National Treasury Public Finance Statistics just to see whether it's possible to include these entities into some system that may work. But even then, honorable members, it will take time because it means you're changing too many not rules and regulations, but you have to change the way in which these entities have been doing business for long. So we are working on it, but for now, I think what we are worried about is the accuracy of the information. So we want to make sure the information we submit to the committee is accurate information, because the worst thing that can happen would be a position where the committee makes decisions based on information that is incorrect. Chairperson, I think I addressed all the questions. Yes, I think we addressed all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mampo. Yeah, obviously, we'll never say that we have had all the answers that we want. As I said, that you are not directly responsible for those departments. I must say that for sense, I'm not very sure whether I had any response from the issue which was raised about how the withholding of the funds, for instance, the question of the public transport network grant to Mangaung and Rustenburg, because of some failures from the officials to do certain things. But at the end of the day, people who end up being punished for this are the citizens of our country. We've got nothing to do about this. We have paid their taxes and so on. I thought I would like to hear you saying, are we considering better ways of managing this type of a problem? And the question of PRASA was raised, and I think it was Ms. Britton who spoke about vandalization and so on, which is a factor. But this is just a recent problem of the lockdown. PRASA has been having for a long time the question of underspending. And I asked the team, Mampo, whether we do understand the impact of this, not just on service delivery, but on the bigger economy. That one of our objectives when we put money and we spend, the president has been talking about infrastructure spend as the way to stimulate growth. Whether we do understand, or at least the departments do understand that impact of not being able to spend on infrastructure and these other things as far as the bigger economy is concerned. I thought you'd make a reflection on that. Dr. Mampo?
Thanks, Chairperson. I think the first, well, I'll attempt the second question. What makes it very difficult in terms of infrastructure spending, Chair, it's the fact that it is one of the most discretionary items in terms of budgeting. So when a department is having spending pressures, the easiest way or the less difficult way to deal with those pressures would be to look at the infrastructure budgets. But I think the establishment of the team at the presidency led by Dr. Ramohuba will assist, and the fact that the Department of Public Works is now Public Works and Infrastructure, hopefully that will basically deal with the underspending in infrastructure, and they will start to fast track the way in which government implements infrastructure. So the current proposals is that the Office of the Presidency looks at diversifying the funding for these infrastructure projects, where you get the private sector to come in, but then you have the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure who's trying to make sure that government departments' infrastructure is managed in a different way in an attempt to get better infrastructure. But it's difficult, Chairperson, because as I said, if the department is facing spending pressures, it's easier to postpone the implementation of some of the infrastructure projects. They do understand the implication of this. However, because of the budget reductions that we have been seeing over a couple of years, most of what has been affected would have been the infrastructure budget. So I will ask Ulrika to deal with the question on PRASA, please. Thanks, Chairperson.
Okay, I'll deal with both questions, Mampo. So the one on PRASA and on the withholding. And my apologies, Chair, I thought maybe I wasn't quite clear. So on the withholding of conditional grants, like the public transport network grant to cities, is a temporary measure. And we only do it for 30 days, where the municipality or any receiving officer, for that matter, will have to then explain to the national department before money is withheld on why it should not be withheld. So it's a short-term measure to get the municipality to do the right thing that would ensure that delivery happens. A withholding process is only for 30 days. It can go up to 120 days if the department isn't satisfied that the necessary remedial action has been taken by that municipality. In that case, what then is required is for the department to then also show what it is doing to assist the municipality to fix whatever is wrong. And so it's not a withholding of money in the Division of Revenue Act is very different to the stopping of money. The stopping of money is the dangerous one where money then doesn't flow at all. Whereas with the withholding of money, money will still flow. It might just be 30 days. Best case scenario, 30 days later. Worst case scenario, 120 days later. Then just in relation to public transport, and I suppose what you're asking, Chair, is a general question around understanding public transport and its role in the economy. And that when public transport is being provided, it's being provided because it provides two very important issues deals with two very important issues in the economy. The first is it provides access to jobs, access to other economic opportunities, access to social services, and the second part of this is around mobility. And that's the very important bit that we can deal with, whether it is road-based public transport or whether it is rail public transport. And what that then means when households spend a lot of money, and what does it do for welfare when a large chunk of households in South Africa who are public transport captive, what is that? 70% of households who don't own cars are public transport captive. What kind of options do we provide for them, and how do we ensure that it is affordable? So when PRASA doesn't work and we have a policy objective on a rail-based public transport system, or the rail or a backbone for public transport is rail, then it does become important for us to ensure that we have an institution that works, and not only an institution that works, but that a service is being provided that is safe, and more importantly, that it is reliable. It is not acceptable for people to get to work, 3 times out of 10, they get to work late every day. And there's a threat around that, especially when it is a lot more, when jobs are a lot more temporary. So it's not just on what it does to the economy, but also about what it does for general household welfare. And one of the important things to look into all of that is whether the institutional framework that we have for public transport is fit for purpose, where the functions are assigned properly, whether we have proper responsibilities on where they need to be around all of that, and more importantly, that we have a subsidy policy that is equitable. And the Department of Transport is working on that to ensure that when we look at what needs to happen within the public transport space, this includes amendments to the National Land Transport Act and reviewing the public transport strategy and developing, which is where they're not at an advanced stage, but they're somewhere in the middle of putting together a public transport subsidy policy that would hopefully give us a greater security of where we go to with public transport. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Mampo and your team. There is no doubt that they are very difficult and challenging issues, and I would just request that the issues that have been raised by the honorable members, right? While you have provided some answers, I think you also need to take those things to the respective departments and SOEs. As I said, that National Treasury will end up carrying that cross on their behalf. I think they must provide. You have provided your answers, and I think it will be good. Some of them are going to be calling to the committee, as I indicated, that if the committee adopts the proposed program, I see that there is SAA and there is ESCOM scheduled to have an audience with this committee. But thank you very much. Well appreciate. We're meeting tomorrow with National Treasury again. Is it not so, Dr. Mampo?
Yes, Chairperson, the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer.
Okay, you won't be there.
Unfortunately, Chair, I will miss this one.
Okay. Thank you so much. Oral members, let's go to agenda item number 5, which is a draft program of the Standing Committee on Appropriation first term of 2021. That is the 26 January to 19 March 2021 program. Are we having that in front of us, honorable members?
Chairperson.
Honorable Peters, please come in.
Thank you very much. I'm just requesting that Darren flight it on the screen because my systems are malfunctioning. I can't go back to my emails.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. Can we do that, Darren, please? Okay, there you go. Darren, just take us through.
Thank you, Chairperson. What's going on now? Tomorrow we have the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer on the contract deviations and expansions requests. Next week Wednesday, it's
don't rush too much, okay? Steady, yeah, okay.
Next week Wednesday is the budget lockup and the tabling of the Minister of Finance for 2021 budget. On Thursday the 25th is briefing by Minister of Finance of all 4 committees on the 2021 budget. Tuesday 2 March, we have the joint meeting of the Finance and Appropriations committees by PBO and FFC on 2021 budget. Wednesday the 3rd March, we have comment by SALGA on the 2021 Division of Revenue Bill. Friday 5 March, we have a follow-up briefing by ESCOM. Tuesday 9 March, we have comment by PBO and FFC on the 2021 Division of Revenue Bill. Wednesday 10 March, we have briefing by National Treasury on the Division of Revenue Bill. Friday 12 March, we have public hearings on the Division of Revenue Bill. Tuesday 16 March, committee is considering and adopting its report on the 2021 Division of Revenue Bill. And then Wednesday, which will be our last meeting, is follow-up briefing by South African Airways, and we will also consider the draft program for term 2 of 2021. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable members, that's the proposed program. As you can see, that most of the things that we must do are mandatory things as the Money Bills Act that we need to do. That's one of the challenges. That's one of the challenges that we are having, that the time to perform the oversight responsibility on other things is very much limited. I think we've raised this before, but here, this is the program, honorable members. And while talking about it, you said to do a meeting ESCOM and SAM, right?
Yes, Chairperson.
And I think we need to, on that one, on those two, just request the honorable members to send some of the questions that they want answered, so that by the time they come here, they were able to say these are the areas that they want them to focus on. Otherwise, you end up with institutions being all over and us losing on the most important things that bother the committee. Okay, honorable members, here's the draft program. Any amendment, or can we have the mover for the adoption of this program?
Honorable Matafa, I move for the adoption of the program, Chair.
Seconder?
Mlenzana, second, Chair.
Thank you, honorable members. Can we proceed on the basis of this? If anything obvious, honorable members pressing, we'll come back to the committee. But can we, for now, proceed on the basis of this proposed program? So no counter, so we'll move on the basis of this program. Thank you, honorable members. Can we go to agenda item number 6? Consideration and adoption of the draft minutes dated the 1st of December 2020. Honorable members, I take it we are having the minutes in front of you. Any changes? Mover for the adoption of the minutes.
I move, Chair.
Honorable Ntlangwini moves for the adoption of the minutes. A seconder. Seconder of the minutes. Honorable members.
Matafa, I second, Chairperson.
Honorable Matafa seconds. Can we then adopt the minutes as the true reflection of the meeting held on the 1st of December 2020? Yes, thank you. In fact, honorable members, we are doing very well with the minutes. I heard somewhere that there are people who don't adopt minutes, where we find that they have got over 15 sets of minutes which have not been adopted. I think let's keep up that good work ethic. Darren, do you have anything on agenda item number 7?
Nothing, Chairperson.
Nothing. Honorable Mlenzana, do you want anything from you?
No, Chairperson, nothing much except to place on record that I've heard the comments made by our colleagues regarding the state of affairs that we are overwhelmed with. Thank you very much. We have had even at us and even up to now, and I can assure you, as we try to recuperate from grieving, we are sure that you are always with us. Thank you so much, Chairperson. Thanks for the words of warmth and comfort from our colleagues.
Thank you, Honorable Lenzana. You were also speaking for me. Thank you very much. And the messages that we received even at that time, and what comes from the honorable members from this committee. And perhaps we need to send a word of condolences to everyone, the South Africans who have lost their loved ones. That's why, as government, we should, and as South Africans, we should focus on us making sure that we stop this devastation in our country. Thank you so much, honorable members. This takes us to the end of the meeting, and the meeting stands adjourned, and let's meet tomorrow. Thank you so much, honorable members. Thank you.
Very much, Chair.
Treasury. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, honorable.
Thank you, Chairperson.
I thank you, honorable Peters. No.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Darren?
Yes, Chairperson.
When do we sign minutes?
How are we going to sign? How are we going to sign the minutes?
I think I will be in Cape Town for the budget next week. Yeah.
That's fine. I will then make a plan to get to work, and then I'm gonna have to print out all those minutes for your signature.
Yeah, you can even also speak to
Funeka.
You can also speak to Funeka, and yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'll speak to her regarding the best option for you to sign it.
Okay.
All right, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.